he thought someone was following him. A car, a shadow that wouldn't leave. Strange calls in the night. In a city where roots are fortunes and roots are feuds, fear is never idle. It is a warning. On a late Sunday afternoon in Meadowlands, that warning became a gunshot. The man behind the nickname MKZ died in an Audi twisted around a pole. The street kept its secrets, and the city kept its questions. Quanelli Mkz Makwanza was a name that traveled the routes of Soweto like a whispered address. To supporters, he was a successful taxi owner, someone who knew the city's arteries and could move people and money through them. To others, he was a figure in an industry where alliances shift like sand and violence is never far from negotiation. In early August, reports confirmed his assassination in Meadowlands, Zone 1. Police opened a murder investigation and appealed for witnesses. Known variously in press and among locals as Quanelli Mwanza, MKZ, and at times Taki, he was an established presence in Soweto's taxi world and a member of the MDN Taxi Association. Community accounts described him as flamboyant and charitable, a man who celebrated publicly and supported local funerals and events, and as someone who owned multiple taxis that serviced township routes. These descriptions came from community reporting and eyewitnesses. They sketch a local status earned on the road and in the network. To understand Makwanza's life is to understand the business he worked in. South Africa's minibus taxi industry is not merely transport. It is employment, credit, political influence, and sometimes territorial conflict. Controllers of routes, the turnstiles of commuters, can amass both wealth and enemies. In Gauteng and cities like Johannesburg and Soweto, taxi associations regulate routes and resolve disputes, but those same negotiations can become combustible. Reporters framed the killing within this wider context of industry tensions and route violence. Locals and social media portrayed MKZ as larger than the life of an ordinary taxi driver. Video tributes and funeral footage circulated after his death, showing the community mourning and the kind of public show that marks the passing of a known operator. Flowers, gathered mourners, and shared memory. Those public rituals underscored two truths. He was known, and his death mattered to the community that depended on the services and relationships taxis provided. Weeks before the shooting, sources told reporters that Makwanza had sensed danger. He reported feeling followed while walking home. A Toyota Corolla was named by a source as possibly tailing him. He received strange phone calls and confided to acquaintances that he believed people were trying to kill him. Such statements would later sit at the uncomfortable center of the investigation. A man who felt hunted, and a city where threats are too often followed by violence. These accounts come from local eyewitness reporting and community interviews. On a Sunday afternoon, at around 2:35 to 2:45 p.m. in Meadowlands Zone 1, near Reverend Frederick Samuel Modise Road, multiple assailants emerged from a vehicle and fired on an Audi TT, driven by Makwanza. Reports described 3 men exiting their car and opening fire. Makwanza attempted to flee, but the Audi crashed into a pole and spun out. He was transported to Chepo Hospital, where he later succumbed to his injuries. Police confirmed a murder investigation and appealed for information from witnesses. Media accounts pieced together the immediate aftermath. Neighbors and witnesses who called emergency services, the crowd of onlookers who gathered, and social media posts that shared photographs of the crashed Audi and messages of shock. Local outlets recorded the tragic geometry of the incident. A high-end sports car in a township street, a scene that threaded class markers and brutal violence into a single image. Official statements were conservative. The police confirmed the basic facts and stated that arrests had not been made publicly at that time. A crucial absence in the public record is motive. While community chatter and the man's own warnings suggested targeted danger, police did not publicly confirm why he was killed. Speculation in community reporting ranged from business disputes to personal vendettas. Reporters pointed to the taxi industry's history of rivalry as a contextual factor, not as proof. The official investigation remained open and underpowered, at least in the public domain. No definitive motive was released in the stories gathered in the days following the killing. The minibus taxi economy in South Africa grew as a grassroots response to demand for reliable, flexible transport where formal systems underdelivered. Over time, informal controllers and associations stepped into governance roles, deciding who operates which routes and when. Those decisions can be financial lifelines or the cause of fierce conflict. Reporters covering Makwanza's death placed it in this frame. Not every violent death in a taxi town is industry-related, but the industry's history of route disputes makes that a primary line of inquiry. Transport officials publicly condemned the killing and urged cooperation with police. When a taxi boss is killed, three narratives typically compete in public: that the killing was industry-related, a turf or route dispute, that it was a personal vendetta, and that it was a political assassination, was a personal or criminal vendetta unrelated to taxi operations, or that it was a targeted hit from outside the normal industry conflicts. In the case of MKZ, early reporting did not privilege one narrative with evidence. Journalists and officials kept to the facts at hand: prior warnings, the shooting and crash, hospital transfer, and death, an open murder investigation. Community speculation filled the silence, but police statements remained the official baseline. The death of an owner changes the economics of routes. When a known operator is removed suddenly, routes can be disputed, vehicles redistributed, and agreements renegotiated, sometimes peacefully, sometimes with force. Reports did not document immediate wide-scale violence following Makwanza's killing, but local taxi communities were described as shaken and cautious. Authorities tend to double down on appeals for calm and cooperation with police to prevent retaliatory clashes. At the time of initial reporting, no arrests were publicly announced. The standard legal path would be an investigation, potential identification and arrest of suspects, a charge sheet, and then prosecution. Reporters and public records would update as that process proceeded. In many cases, it can take weeks or months for definitive developments to appear in the news. For now, the public record remained an open inquiry. If arrests are made, public narratives will shift. Motive will be asserted, evidence revealed, trials scheduled. If no arrests occur, suspicion and rumor can calcify, changing the social map of the township and potentially prompting further acts of retribution. Alternatively, community mechanisms and association leadership might step in to broker peace and limit violence, a path that depends on local actors and the speed of law enforcement. At the time of reporting, those trajectories were still open. From the community coverage, several themes recur: grief for a known figure, fear that the killing reflects deeper instability, suspicion that enemies existed, and calls for justice. Whether these voices cohere into a single explanation is another matter. They do, however, show the social consequences of violence. in a community where transport bosses are simultaneously service providers and power brokers. He reported being followed. He received strange calls. On a Sunday, the shadow found him in the bright noon of a township road. The Audi spun. A pole took the strain, and a life that ran the city's arteries went still. The questions remain. Who pulled the trigger, and why? The city is alive with motion. Taxis, people, rumor. But in the spaces between routes, a silence grows where answers should be. The investigation continues, the community remembers, and the road keeps running.